All right, so picking up where we left off. So we are successfully listing and adding bagels. And so we've got this done, we've got this done. We need to get this filter working. We need to get the like an edit feature kind of thing going. And we need some way to delete these. First thing I want to talk about is the filter. If for no other reason, then this is a thing that you'll have to know on the code challenge. And it's sort of counterintuitive, so I want to make sure that we get some experience with that. These things you can almost intuit your way through. This one's requires a little bit of explanation. So if I'm trying to start this filter component, I'm going to start by, how about I add another section here in main, and this will be like search. All right, so I add that, and this is going to be a form. That has one input. That's text. And our placeholder will be like search for a bagel. And let's see what that looks like. Cool. Thing of beauty. And let's see. So what we want is, as we're typing, we want to only show bagels that contain what you're typing somewhere in them. So first thing we want to do is capture the form. So we want to bind whatever the value is to something in state, and then whenever that changes, we update that also. So we'll say, all right, state search term. What should we initialize search term to? Think to yourself. Whenever we're working with state, we got to be very thoughtful about what the initial values are. I'm going to call on someone. Katie, what do I initialize search term to?
An empty array.
Empty array? Why'd you say empty array? Okay, so we're going to bind this to the input, and then like as we're typing, we want it to update this. Is it going to push things into that array? Someone help Katie out.
It should be a string.
String. So we're typing in an input box, and so we want that to be, that should be a string. So if it's a string, what do we initialize it to? Empty string. That way, if we're doing something like, does this string include this, the string's length, any of these kinds of things, we know that it's going to have those values or those methods available on it. If it's null, if we don't put it in here at all, and we call matches or includes or length or something, doesn't work. That's also a thing that's in every framework. I was actually talking with Nelly about this yesterday in Vue. Have to initialize something to the correct data type. Cool, so search term is an empty string, and then we bind it. So we'll say that the value of this is this.state.search term. And that's getting pretty long, so let's put it on some new lines. Okay, we don't actually want a submit button because we want it to just filter real time as we're typing. So this is actually all the HTML that we need. All right, we've done half of it in our captured form. Now we need like an on change this dot update search term. Okay, so if we're doing that, then we need to actually have a this dot update search term method. So that's going to take in an event. And think about what you would put in here. Think to yourself, man, you really can't see shit through that window. That's rough. Boodly sun.
That's how it was yesterday with the practice.
Yeah, I couldn't really see it.
All right, so what are we putting inside of update search term? I'm calling someone. Let's see, Joe, give it a guess. What you got?
I'm gonna do some kind of this set state.
That's kind of what I think. All right, and then what goes in here?
So we're gonna wanna see if it matches something that's in.
Oh, we're not even there yet. All we're doing is the other half of the captured form. So we've bound the value, now we just need to update the state. So if this part's right, what goes in here? That's the state it initializes to. We need to update it to something.
Like this dot state dot search term.
So that's going to be part of it. But we don't need to do this dot state. We do need search terms, because that's the thing that we're updating. What are we updating it to? Anybody?
The value of the input.
Value of the input. And how do I get that, Arena?
Event.argument.
Wonderful. Cool. So now I've fully captured the form. The value is bound and the update is happening. So if I'm doing that right, I should be able to type in here and see the things that I'm typing. Cool. So that means state's updating. All right. Now, this is where some magic happens. When I type, I want to narrow down this list to things that include this. The naive way to do this, like if I asked to do this right now, you might think, where's the bagel list? All right, so here's the bagel list. You might try to do something with doing the filter in here. No. This just shows a list of bagels, whatever list that we give it. So if that list gets smaller, that re-renders. That's cool. We don't have to do anything with that. I've also seen people make like another thing in state, like this dot state dot filtered bagels, and you update that with like set state as you're typing. Even better way to do it than that. What we're going to do is technically called a computed property. This is also called derived state, more academically. Derived state is state in the application that is a combination or in some way just derived from another piece of state. So in particular, we want state that is based on the list of bagels we have and the search term. That's not actually new state itself. It's calculated based off of some mashup of these two.
Can you just repeat that definition?
Absolutely. Computed properties or derived state, same thing, are state that is based on some existing state. It's not new state itself. But in our case, a combination of search term and the total list of bagels. That's a kind of derived state. Another one, if we wanted an array of just the ratings for bagels, like let's say we wanted an average bagel rating or something, that's not itself state. It's something you would calculate based on state that you have. Can I get a brave volunteer to explain that back to me? Yeah.
So computer property is state based on something that you already have in your existing state, so you can combine like two attributes that you had in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Or like you said, create an array based off of like just the rating, so you could take just one small part of the state and create something from it.
Exactly. We don't store it as state because it's not. It's derived from state. For example, I want an array of all the ratings, not as objects, just an array of numbers. What I would do is something like all ratings, and that would be maybe equal to this.state.bagels.map, and I'd take each bagel and just return their rating. And now I can do this.allRatings anywhere in any of these things. Sum them, average them, do whatever. This is purely based on some existing state that I have. So in our case, we want some derived state that is the filtered bagels. So we'll say filtered bagels equals this.state.bagels. And if I want the list of bagels, but potentially fewer of them, I want to select was what would be in Ruby. Filter. I can't tell you the number of times to say filter in Ruby lessons. It's a rough one to get out of. All right, and then what does filter expect back? Think to yourself. Takes a function. What is it expecting the function to return? Gauge.
I'm not really sure. I was thinking like a Boolean, like true or false.
That's exactly what it is. Things that return true stay. Things that return false get kicked out. So if we're looking for something that returns true or false, and I want to only have bagels that match the search term, what can I do?
Includes.
Yeah, sure. I can do bagel.type, return bagel.type.includes. And what am I seeing if it includes? Search term. This.state.search term. So if plain includes whatever part of a string that I've typed out, that could be plain, that could be p, that could be ain. If it includes it somewhere in there, then it stays in. Otherwise, it gets kicked out. Any guesses what I do with this computed property that I made?
So what's the question?
So assuming this works, assuming I wrote this correctly and this filtered bagels computed property is an array that gets smaller, bigger, does all the things we're talking about, how do I use it? Nope, good guess. Something on this screen. Yeah, cat.
Can you pass it as a prompt to Bagel list?
That's exactly what we can do. So if instead of passing in every single bagel, which is what state.bagels is, if I make that filtered bagels, cool. Filtered bagels updates in real time as I type, which will make that component re-render. Let's see if it works. This dot stage, come on, man. Yep, done like something. This dot state dot bagels dot filter. By my math, that should work. All right, let's see. Let's take a look. See. I do this dot state dot bagels. That's not coming back. This dot filtered bagels. That's good. But what's curious to me is that isn't recalculating. I can tell it's not recalculating because if it was, it would, for every one of those bagels, it would log that. How strange. Maybe, spitballing here, needs to do it as a function. It's entirely possible. So all that changes there is now you have to invoke it. Yep, we got something. Because we're dealing with pure data still. All right, what is this? Oh, it's because it's got bad data. I should have rejected those posts. But mira, I can. Oh, this is gonna take for fucking ever to load. This is the advantage of seeds. I reseed the server. All that stuff is back to normal. That's exactly what we use seeds for. Get back to a known state. All right, so I head back over to the API. I run connects seed run production. Oop. Node v. Oh, why is everything taking so much time? Actually, check this out. This is even better. Let's say I didn't have control over the server. I had a student with a capstone of this project. We're like, whatever, the API just returns some garbage sometimes. What else could I do that is within my control before I start doing all this stuff?
Filter out the null.
Filter out the blank values. So I can do a filter for bagel and say only include ones that have bagel.name and bagel or type. Bagel.type and a rating. If it doesn't have both of those, returns false, gets kicked out. Nice, looks better now too. So what happens when I'm looking for onion? Pretty cool.
To that filter function. So will you go back to that filter function?
Absolutely.
I still can't see.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's somewhere I can stand that'll block it out. I'm tall. Is it coming from over there?
No, I think it's against the wall. I'm not sure actually. Oh.
Is it over there?
Yes, that's what it is.
Oh.
What happened?
Is it more recognize flame if it's capitalized?
Oh, yeah, I bet it is. That makes sense.
Where is that light coming from?
It's called Poe.
You're a little tall.
Yeah, I gotta
It's not.
It's not gonna work.
It's not filtering correctly though.
Yeah, it's not
case
filtering.
Like if I type
Oh.
L,
You just gotta do
Case
two lowercase.
sensitive.
Got normalize.
Normalize that data. So, to lowercase. Is the C capitalized in that?
yes.
Okay.
You need to do it for the type.
Yep.
Cannot read property to lowercase of no. That's fine.
That's fine.
Wait. Where did you put the first to lowercase?
After the bagel.
After type. I wonder if.
Return base.
House of bagels dot math.
Put it in the wrong place.
That's great.
You will not rest until.
Darkening anything? Where is it coming from? I can't figure
Oh,
out
yeah,
where
there
that
you go.
light is.
I think that it's like being scattered through the through the blinds, so it's like just hazing.
Good gravy. I hate this room.
Maybe just trying to hang from the vent or something.
Yeah, hang upside down like a bat.
I don't know why Dan likes teaching this room so much.
I hate this one.
I like this room better, but not now as a student, I see why you hate it.
It's not bad. I mean, at least it's not like freezing Alaska.
Yeah.
It usually
It
is.
used to be the colder one.
It was, now
And
it's
now it's
switched.
just.
Yeah.
Why?
It's just because of the-
Why is this
All right.
not functioning?
Let's chat.
Down here on this station.
So let's review the thing. Let's review the things that we changed. We added search term to state, and we bound it, we controlled it here. Bound it there, updating it there. So we also added this update search term method. So we bound that, and we're using that state and the search term in this filtered bagels method. And that should return a filtered array of bagels. And then that's what we pass in to that bagel list component. It's a function, so we have to invoke it. But that's how you filter something. Cool? Questions? All right. So now let's refactor it. Refactoring is same behavior, different implementation. Let's see what of this we can componentize. So we maybe say touch source filterbox.js. You can add a CSS file as well. You would. I'm keeping everything in the source directory, but you can organize it however you want. And then this filter box, is this going to have state or not?
Yes,
Why?
because search term.
Search term. So I'm going to import React from React. While I'm at it, I can import filterbox.css. I'm going to export default class filter box extends. I'll pull in component. Extends component. And then this is going to have some state. Just needs the search term. And then the render method on this. So this is this whole thing here. So I'm going to take this section out. And return. I'm going to do that. And now I need to look. All right, well, what am I missing? Update search term. So I take update search term, yank it out of here, move it over to filter box. Nice. So it's got search term, it's got update search term. Uh-oh. Now I got a problem. How does filtered bagels see the search term? Because now it shouldn't really be owned by this. Uh-oh. How do I solve this dilemma? You will run into this problem, like your entire component-based career. What do you do? Ultimately, I need to get filtered bagels into bagel list. That's a hard constraint. So what does that tell me about where filtered bagels has to live? It needs to get there, but it's going to be passing as props. Where is its state? Where does it have to be state?
Filter box or the search term?
Nope. It has to be an app. That's the only place it can be.
So you import bagel list filter box?
Um,
Nope.
so this filtered bagels needs to live in this component or one of its parents technically, but it has to be somewhere above that to get passed in. To correctly calculate this, we need the list of bagels, not a problem, but we also need the search term. Hey. We're going to bring in filter box. And this whole section here, that's where that's going to go, filter box. Shit. How do I square that circle? That's a tricky one. Filtered bagels has to live here, but it also needs to see search term. So if that has to live here, what does that tell us about where search term has to be? Has to be an app also. Well, wait a minute. So if that moves back over here, what do we know about how we update state? Those functions that do like this.setState, where do those have to live?
Also,
They have to live where the state is. So that means this update search term also needs to live here. Okay, well, how is it supposed to get the search term and the way to update that then?
pass those props.
Pass it as props. So instead of this.state.search term, we're binding it to this.props.search term. And we're passing in that function too. So now, search term and update search term. Oh gosh. Search term equals this.state.search term. I'm in app right now. You can bind through components. That's fine. You can only do it down though. So if this search term needs to be used outside of that, that's fine, but that means somebody else is managing state on that. And it's getting passed in as props to somebody else. Same thing. The way that you update state always needs to live where that state is. Those two go hand in hand. So if these have to live in the same component, but they end up getting used in this other component, NBD. But you got to pass it in. Let's see if it still works. And can anybody think of how I can simplify this component now? Make it a function. Doesn't need to be a class anymore because it's not actually maintaining state. So now this is export default function. Doesn't have state anymore. Doesn't have a render method. We've dumbed it up. And this, there's no this anymore. It's a functional component, so props is the argument that gets passed in. Still work? Still works.
Wait, did you change anything in app?
So all right. So this filter box takes in the search term. That's what it binds to. And the means to update that search term. That's how we can attach somebody that onChange event on the input. And then, but otherwise, search term is state. Update search term is exactly what it was before. Questions?
I mean, in general, if your app gets bigger and bigger, how can you keep track with all the components?
Sure, great question. So in real life, I would probably break this into a few more layers also. Like this is feeling like too much of a God component, just does too many things. And so you figure out different ways you can further break that up so the pieces are just smaller. And the other answer to your question is this is what Redux does. Redux is one place for, let's call it 80% of the state in your application. All just lives in one giant ass object that any component can see. That's kind of the idea behind Redux.
That's pretty cool.
So what is that in Redux?
What I just said. It is a central store for the state in your application and the means to change that state. And so any of those components can talk to it.
Is that what all this?
That's it.
So why wouldn't you always use that?
That's a killer question, Katie. And the reason I've got this component hierarchy, this and this and this, this, and this one has this one and this, which has this, and this and this and this. All right, so that's my component hierarchy for some application. Katie's question was, all right, if we're keeping all the state in one place that the entire application can use, why wouldn't we do that all the time for everything? And the way that we've been using state so far is you got some state here, gets passed into there, gets passed into there, places that need it might also get passed into here, which might pass it into there, pass it into there. Maybe this has its own state, pass into there, pass into there. Only goes one direction. It's pretty easy to keep track of. If we do what the worst React developers in the world, they're bad people too, if I'm being honest. So if we're using Redux for that, there's a totally sane way we can do that. Maybe all of that kind of comes in through here uniformly. The worst React developers go, hey, I know this thing talks to Redux and this thing and this thing and this thing does too, and so does this and so does this. And this thing talks to this thing, but this thing's actually just talking to Redux. And then this thing's talking to Redux, and this thing's talking. Wait, where's this happening? Where's this coming from? Who cares, man? Just keep going.
Just keep going.
And pretty soon your state management looks like that.
Jesus Christ.
I once described a pattern. I used Vue as an example, but it technically is this. You could do this in React also. Called Model View Component. That was my proposed architecture for. There you go. That was. So this is the thing I just drew. That versus that, which is how most people tend to use Redux. And so this was my proposed solution to this. It seems complicated, and it kind of is. However, the lines don't cross. The blue lines are data, only goes one way. The red lines are actions, they only go one way. So if you're trying to figure out how something got from this nested component to the API request, you can cut things out of the debugging process really quickly. Did it get to here? 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 A lot of pieces to it, but hella flexibility. And like the stores in Vue are exactly like Redux. They're just one giant ass object. But you've made it so much easier to figure out where something came from versus. Also, like app architecture is hard. It's just fucking hard. You can't make it not hard. And so people didn't do this just to be jerks. They did it because they needed to figure something out. And so you need to figure out where you want the complexity. And the ideal state for that is in the pattern. If the pattern manages the complexity for you, your brain doesn't have to.
Have you ever given a TED Talk?
No, I've not.
Awesome. Only if you pull up the screen.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions on this? We have a couple more things I want to get to before feelings.
I think just one last question.
Yeah, hit me.
I know that's context, React, context components.
Yes.
Can do the same.
Yes.
Same thing. So, I mean, is there any advantage you in React to do like that?
So context is very dangerous. Powerful, but like those two things tend to go hand in hand. Context is a way to make a portal between two components. So if you need to get state from one component to another, but they're not in each other's hierarchy, or you don't want to drill it down through all of those different layers of component, you can essentially create a little wormhole that takes it from one to the other. You do that with context components. And so as you imagine, that's an even easier way to do that. Now, there's like very good reasons to do that also. Like for example, who's a logged in user? You could pass that down through every fucking component, but that really is something that any component should be able to like get a logged in user's name or something. And so the appropriate architecture pattern for that is called a service. And so like in this example, this component fires up an action to this service, which can also get whatever from a database and return whatever down as data. You want to be incredibly intentional about what's a service and what's not. It's kind of out of scope for this program, really, but that's what context does in React, is it's their way of implementing that pattern. But if everything's a service, then any one of these components can do that with any data, and that's a mess. Great question.
You use a component-based lettering?
Correct. Everything is at this point. Even ones that sort of look like they aren't. Ember, Angular, Vue, React, they are minor variations on the exact same thing.
Makes sense.
Cool. What else? Awesome. Onward. So next thing I want to do, if we look at our diagram, that. All right. Adding, done. Listing, done. Filtering, done. So we have update and delete. I'm going to do delete first because it's easy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use Font Awesome for this.
Different icons?
Glyph up. So,
Let's go.
oh, they make you sign up for their shit if you try to do it through their site. So just
Get their CDN.
it's just look for the CDN directly. And we want to put it in HTML. So we just copy that. Go over to this. Link it in the HTML. Never forget, this is still HTML pages and stuff, even like with the JSX woo-woo shit. In the public folder, there's this index.html file. That's what everything like ultimately gets thrown into. Like, I copied the Font Awesome HTML.
Do you want me to put it in Slack?
Yeah, get it. In your public index HTML file, I threw it in the head just like it would any other CSS file. You see this div ID root? Huh,
That's where everything's going.
I sort of remember that from index.js. Document.getElementById, root, app component. That's the bridge between those. All right, so I brought in Font Awesome. If we haven't talked about it already, Font Awesome is a glyph library. And the reason that I'm bringing it in, you do trash can, you do times, it's a pretty popular one. Do times circle. Please, please, please don't use the letter X for this. They're not the same. X has flat feet, flat top. They're not the same glyph. So use something that's meant for that. It's like if I see that in like somebody's applying and I see that on a portfolio project or something, it's like, well, come on, it's not that hard. So I want on the listings. So I'll show you how you use it. So we're gonna make I tags in here, and then it tells you the class that you use. FAS and a separate class, FA-times-circle. So we do class, FAS, FA times circle. And then, oh, class name.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering what's going on.
Oop, didn't like that. I wonder if I do FA. There we go. You have to bring in the solid library separately.
Oh, it's separate? That's weird.
Correct. All right, neat. So they're all over the place. I'll leave it as an exercise for the student to figure out how you get these all right aligned. Actually, fuck it. We can flex that. Yeah.
Can you go back to your listing last name?
Absolutely.
And you put it in your cannot
Which
file.
Uh,
Class.
No, I'm looking at the wrong one.
All right, I'll show you how we can get those all right aligned so that doesn't look like trash. Check this out.
Does it matter where you put the link in the HTML page? In the index at HTML?
Put it-
It has to be in the head.
Correct.
So, yeah, so that's what
I'm going to make these peers like this. And I'm going to give this a class name of Bagel-listing. And then we're going to flex these apart. So we're going to flex the parent, and then we're going to tell its children to be spread apart. And that's how we can get all of the icons right aligned. So we're already importing Bagel listing CSS. So in here, Bagel-listing. Yep, Bagel-listing. And then we display flex and justify content space between. Might also need to set the width. Yeah, there we go. So now those are all together, and when we say max width on this is 150 pixels. There we go. How about 250? There we go. Pretty dope.
What was your max one?
250. We can also, while we're at it, say Bagel listing icons should have cursor pointer to indicate that they're actions. Turns it into a little gloved hand. And then I'm also going to say align items center. That's going to vertically center it. There we go. Much better. Hell, while we're at it, let's give it a box shadow. 2 pix, 0, 2 pix. Why don't it like that? This is the second time I've screwed this. Oh, I know why. I screwed up the exact same way. That has to be %. There we go. Then give it some padding and a margin. Hey! Not bad. Though I think that's supposed to be there and that's supposed to be 0. There we go. You probably also get rid of the bullet points now, but dope. So we got that little icon.
Oh, can you go back to that cursor pointer thing?
Yeah,
Did you give the bagel listing class to the div or
to the div.
Okay.
And then I made the p tag and the I tag peers.
Yeah.
Questions about the visual part of this? Neat. So now we need something to happen when we click on it. On click to the rescue. So maybe we say on click delete Bagel. Then we need a delete Bagel up here. It's going to take in that event and do something. Let's see if we got here. Are we correctly catching that? Well, yes, we are. Not bad. Oh, one other thing we can do on the listing, check this out. We can tell that I that we want the color to be like 0, 50%, 50%. Now it's red. I'm actually going to darken that up a little bit. Cool. So, all right, we're catching that one. What do we need to do to delete this? Ben? Ooh, but we need to delete it from the server also, Arena.
Oh, well, I just got parent node.
That'll take it out of the DOM, but remember, we can't work with the DOM in React. Can't do it in Vue, can't do it in Number. All of our DOM shit is right off because all this stuff lives above the DOM. It's handling the DOM for us. So fetch call has to be part of it. And then think about when we were adding something. We need to do the opposite of that. So what do? We need to do what? Re-render the list. Well, the React will handle re-rendering the list. How do we make it re-render the list? Have to remove it from state. We do that, all the other re-rendering happens. So, but wait a minute, this doesn't have access to the list of bagels. So if I'm taking it out of the list, where does that have to happen? In app. So maybe I have a delete bagel. What would be a good thing to take in?
ID.
I like it. So it's expecting an ID. And we do a lot of this same stuff we did with post. Let's just start there. The URL for this is going to be what? /ID. Cool. Method is good. Doesn't have a body. Doesn't need one. Cool. But once that's successful, we do want to do something with it. I'll point out, you can response.json this. I don't think it even gives you a response. But we actually don't need to. We don't care what the response is. If it did it successfully, then we can just, based off of that, take it out of state. How do I take it out of state? Ooh, you're right in the ballpark. Mapping is if I want to do a transformation. I want to get rid of something. Could do that.
Filter.
Why would I filter?
Because you're returning the number that's smaller. And you want to find it by the ID that matches.
There we go. I want to keep everything that isn't the ID. So I'm going to this.setState and say bagels is this.state.bagels.filter Bagel.id is not ID. Cool. I wonder if it works. So, who do I not like? Garlic bagel? Yeah, right, buddy. Click it. Nothing happens. Oh, I need to pass it in.
I was gonna say,
So I have this delete bagel function. And then, oh. How am I going to get that down to the listing?
through the list,
I heard it.
prop drilling.
Prop drilling. I know. I'm glad that you know also.
Exactly.
Okay, so if I do delete bagel equals this dot delete bagel, and then over in my bagel list, I drill that down into the listing.
Call the function.
Nope, you don't have to call it delete bagel. You can call it whatever you want.
No, I mean like, do we have to invoke it?
Nope, do not have to invoke it. Because we're passing the definition down so that that listing component can call it. So we take delete bagel equals props.delete bagel. And now, this bagel listing, we can invoke that because it's a prop now.
Can you? Yeah, I don't know where exactly I'm.
Okay, so
App and bagel.
let's draw the picture. All right, app has state bagels. We clear on that? So it also has a function called delete bagel. Takes in an ID. Clear on that? All right, 2 people are clear. So then we have a list and a listing. Listing is where this ultimately needs to get called because that's where that little X button is. So we pass that into here and then we pass it again into there. We prop drill it. To wit, if we look at the code, if I go over to app, delete bagel, just a function. And then I pass that function into bagel list. And then over in bagel list, I pass it down again. And then in bagel listing, that's available as props.delete bagel. So I can invoke it there. Have to pass it an ID, but where do I have that? Where's the ID come from?
Bagel object.
Bagel object.
When you pass delete bagel into bagel listing,
Yep.
do you say props.delete bagel?
So this function is called delete bagel, and this function is called delete bagel. I differentiate between them because this one lives on props, and the other one is just some local variable in the component.
Oh, sorry, bagel list. Bagel list, when you pass it down,
Mhm.
bagel listing.
Yeah, it's one of its props, so you have to do it that way.
Props.delete bagel.
Correct.
Okay, cool. And then why in bagel, you made another function? Oh wait, that's the function.
Because something needs to handle the on-click, And on click, we don't invoke that. React invokes it for us when that happens, and it passes in the event. We're not actually doing anything with the event. But that's why we need a separate function to handle that. Another really common pattern you'll see for that is, all right, so this one's the way that we're going to do it. But a really crazy common way is you do that. What is it? Props.id. That's a really common way to do this also. Exactly. So yeah, that saves you from having to have this separate function that does that. We're just ignoring the event in both of these cases. Because we don't need to prevent default. We don't need to do anything else with it. But it does require a function definition, which is what that is. Cool. We're going to do it this way, though. We're giving it a function definition that just invokes this other function and takes in props .id, which I'm 90% sure is being passed in. It's not. ID equals bagel.id. So it needs to see, delete bagel takes in the ID of the bagel we're deleting. It would presumably get that from ID, which I wasn't actually passing in.
Okay.
So I went over to bagel list and just made a new prop. Because it exists on bagel already. I just wasn't passing it in. Neat. Way to steal my fucking thunder. So, spoiler alert. Bye, garlic.
Bye. See you.
Can you go back to your app.js? I got behind and then you do swag.
So, delete bagel. So I've got that.
Just to think, the only thing we can do is post.
This is being passed into bagel list as a prop. Bagel list. If I go over to bagel list, I'm passing it in here. Delete bagel, props delete bagel. And then in bagel listing, it's getting invoked here whenever that on-click event happens. Yeah.
Is that why we're not invoking it when we first pass it down?
Correct.
Okay, because we want it to be invoked on the click.
Yes. I want that bagel listing to be able to delete something. It doesn't need to know how that happens. It doesn't know the fetch. It doesn't know that state is being modified. It doesn't know shit. It was given the means to do that, and it's allowed to invoke it. Actions up my ass. And that's deleting. Cool. So we're out of time, but I'm going to tell you how to do the update. Works the same way. I would add maybe another one of these for pencil, and maybe I have an edit bagel. That otherwise works the same way. Pencil's a valid one, right?
You did times pencil.
Oh,
Yeah. Pencil.
all right, it is one. Let's say pencil circle. Still nothing? Maybe it's just pencil. There we go. And maybe I put these in a container. Sick. And then over in the styling for that, Bagel listing. I say that FA times circle is one color and FA pencil is another color. So red, green, blue, that's 240. Yeah. And then I can even space these out by saying eyes that follow eyes should have a margin left of 1 rem. Cool, that's too much. All right, and I'm gonna flip those around too. All right, neat. So I want it so that when I click the pencil, I get a chance to edit something. So what that looks like, I've got that. That needs an edit Bagel thing. So I'll go over to Bagel list. Same shit. Edit Bagel. Then over in app.
We also call it
Oh, good call. So what I want here is some kind of like is editing Bagel thing where my
Oh, it's like oh, okay.
exactly.
I think it was called
Actually, I could even do that in line.
additional memories.
What if I did that? Take that out of there. And then in this listing maybe has state now that like whenever you click on that, it adds that exact same form component. Like I bust out the form, and that's the perfect example of making that separate from the section with the heading and shit. It's the same form, but I bind the values to whatever props dot all that shit. But whenever you change them to whatever you want them to be, send that up the ladder to app. Come on, man. And then we're doing, you know how to make a put request. It's just like the post request, except that's it. And then same thing with set state. This one's a little bit trickier because we do need to find it first. I would do it in 2 steps. I would filter it out just like we did with delete and then spread it in like we did with post. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Ta-da! That is full stack apps with React. Before we get out of here for the week, I'll post this video so you'll have both of those to play with over the weekend. What questions do you have?
So you said this is basically a slightly harder version of what the code challenge is?
Yeah. You don't have to delete or update on the code challenge. I can't remember whether or not you have to post. Filtering's in there. Cool. What else? Also, we have all next week to like get better at this. This is pretty much it. Router, we've never gotten to Redux like in any level of depth with any cohort during the program. Sometimes we talk about it mod 5 a little bit. Sometimes we've talked about the grads a couple times. But like, you're looking at it, that's React proficiency. You can do all the things that I just did. You can get a job as a front-end dev anywhere.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right, so
mentioned about the front end debt.
Mhm.
So what components React, like what concept React you need to know whether to obtain the junior debt job?
Great question. What skills do you have to have as a reactive to be employable?
These things.
That's it?
Right there.
You do all this stuff, and not even this last stuff. We'll play with auth probably. If we're just done with this next week, we can talk about auth, but historically we've talked about that mostly in Mod 5. We've never done protected routes before. Client-side state management, that's Redux. Like I said, we've never really gotten to that before. I would say if you can do these things, ta-da, enjoy your front-end dev job.
Is there a way to like switch routes without using router?
Yeah, absolutely. You can just do conditional rendering.
Okay.
So you can have like a thing in state that's like current page, and then you can say just do ternaries like if current page is this, then show this, otherwise don't show anything. And just do that with your entire hierarchy. Under the hood, that's kind of all React Router is.
That's what Damon did his blog on.
Yeah. What else?
Can you just go through the steps a little bit slower on updating a bagel?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I'd recommend you try for updating a bagel, turn this into a class component and keep track of like an is editing state. And if it is editing, which maybe you toggle on and off with this edit bagel button, then you display a form. You can probably extract out that exact same form we're using for posting. Bind the values, control the form, have like a, you can actually, you don't even need to have a separate object like we do with post. You could say something like edit it in real time, and it's gonna change those things as you do it. A way you could do it. But you could also just have like a temporary one that you're controlling the form with. When you click submit or whatever, that's that edit bagel function or whatever. Pass all the new values through that. And then in your app component, do the put with the new things. And then change whatever it is in state in app. So I'd recommend, lots of ways to do it. I'd recommend filtering out the existing record in state and then adding in the new object. What else? Go clean up, everybody. Yay! I will post this video right now.